Everyone. Greetings from Canada. We certainly do appreciate everybody coming out this evening. It's a tremendous turnout here, especially after a long day at work and then having to come and sit back to back on a number of speakers. Just before I get started, I'll have to share this with you. On my last presentation, this will give you an idea that I've actually adjusted the presentation you're going to see here tonight, because on my last one, about partway through, a gentleman got up in the middle of the room and started to walk out towards the back. So I singled him out and I said, "Sir, excuse me, but are you leaving?" He said, "Yeah, I'm going to get a haircut." So I said, "Well, jumpins, couldn't you have gotten a haircut before you came?" And he said, "Well, I didn't need a haircut before I came." So we're going to make this one a little bit shorter tonight. This is going to give you a high-level snapshot into Canada and into our business in Canada. And as you can see that Partho shared earlier, we were one of the more expensive investments in an asset, which we used to be called OLS. But what I'm going to show you today is what I believe is why that investment was a very good investment and exactly where we're sitting today and where we're probably headed into the future. Just to give you a quick snapshot here of Canada, we have about 35 million people in Canada, and we're actually in the second largest geography in the world. So we have a lot of room to spread our wings and travel around, but it's a vast, vast geography in order to get around within Canada. And here on this particular slide, and this is a very busy slide, I know it's going to be very hard to see, but really we're centered in the eastern part of Canada. We have 11 operating sites in Canada, and they're predominantly in the province of Ontario and what we call Atlantic Canada. We're in the G8. We're the 11th or the 8th largest economy in the world, and we're a significant contributor in the G8 community. Our economy actually in Canada, we went through what was perceived as a bit of the recession also, but our economy in Canada, what I'm going to highlight here is that it's doing very well. It's very stable. It always has been stable. Part of that is because of our banking industry within Canada and the regulatory body that governs that. It's a very, very stable economy. And even through the recessionary period, we actually were able to grow in the business. And what this slide is saying, and I know it's very hard to pick up on here, but our GDP, our gross domestic product, through the last year has increased in the range of about 2.4%. Recent numbers that I've heard are in the range of about 2.6 to 2.7 for this fiscal year through that period. So we're in the red over here on the side. So through that period, we certainly were impacted because we're a big exporter in Canada, natural resources and what have you. But we were able to come through this fairly unscathed, and we're back into now on a decent growth rate. So this just speaks to the underlying infrastructure and stability of the Canadian marketplace in order to do business in. The Canadian economy, we're actually recognized as the world's soundest banking system that we have in the world. And there's a number of banks that make that up. I believe we have, what we call in Canada, and I'm going to get to that in a future slide, we have 6 big banks in Canada. We have a number more than that, but 6 of the big banks in Canada will show up in the worldwide ratings every year, year over year over year. And this is very significant for us with regard to 2 factors. One is its representation of our economy in Canada and how we keep things stable. We don't get into a lot of trouble. We carry a lot of capital on the balance sheets of our banks. We recognize where the liabilities are, and we're fairly risk adverse. We're more of a conservative culture, certainly when it comes to financial and fiduciary responsibility. I'm going to focus a couple of slides here in 2 specific industries. The first one is the Canadian telecom sector, and the next one coming after this is the financial services sector. I'm going to do that for 2 specific reasons. One, again, is because it speaks to the health of the economy in Canada. Number 2, these are 2 specific industry market segments that our organization is focused in for growth for HGS in Canada. So in the telecom sector, it's about a $44 billion business, okay? And over here on the right-hand slide, and I know you're not going to be able to pick up on these numbers here, but there's 3 main players that make up the majority of the telecom business in Canada. One is TELUS Corporation, then we have Rogers Communications and Bell Canada. Unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to share, due to client contracts, who our clients actually are in Canada, but what I can share with you is we have two of these three. So you have to figure out which one we don't have. It's important to note, too, that within Canada, and there's a breakdown here on the left-hand side on that chart of the different business that, from a telecom perspective, wireless, what we call landline or the wireline voice part of the business, and then the internet and the data services. What's important to note here is that in Canada, the telecom sector is not just wireless companies. There are wireless companies in Canada, and that's basically their only service and their entrance into the marketplace. And they certainly have come in with regard to competition, but they make up about anywhere from 6 to 10% of the actual overall business in Canada. The key thing is that two of these three large organizations here are not just telecom companies. They also do broadcasting. They're into the media, so they carry significant media assets. And that is very strategic because these media assets actually drive telecom business, okay? So they offer the full spectrum of capability within Canada. They're not just telecommunication companies. This is kind of a significant slide. Again, it's a little busy here, but this is what these two graphs here are depicting is that the average revenue per user on the wireless side in Canada is around $58 per user. It's the highest in the world today, okay? And that is very significant. And part of this is because it's a full bundled offering that the large telecommunication providers offer, which includes TV services, the whole broadcasting media and what have you, internet, all bundled. They bundle everything together, which drives wireless sales and also drives sustainability with regard to maintaining your clients. Over on the right-hand side, what this is showing is penetration of the wireless market into Canada. And you'll see here in blue, at 81 per 100 persons, it's one of the smallest penetration rates that there is, which shows significant upside with regard to penetration rates of wireless subscriptions in Canada. So even with new entrants that have come into the marketplace, there's still substantial growth for the three large players, such that they're not stepping over one another, going after the same marketplace. There's still quite a bit of the market for them to capture themselves. Another key point here is that in Canada, with regard to telecommunications, there's been some talk of other providers around the world coming in and creating some intense competition within Canada. Again, Canada is the second largest geography in the world, and there's only 35 million people. How many people want to make the substantial investments in infrastructure and what have you to move into that type of geography and come in and go after the marketplace? There's probably other markets in the world where you would want to be. So this is significant, and we've just seen that. We're in the U.S., an organization called Verizon had made overtures of maybe coming into Canada, and they have since backed off, right? There is only so much of a market. Canadian banking sector, it's about a $143 billion industry in Canada. It's made up of a number of certainly banking institutions, but we have what's called the Big Six. And the Big Six on this chart here, why these are significant is that these will show up on most reports when you look at the whole banking sector on a global basis. If not for the return on equity that they drive, also the number of assets that are under management by these institutions. Each one of these organizations that you see up here is actually in our pipeline of opportunities at HGS Canada. These are some of the things that the banking sector is going through, though, in Canada. It's a very stable industry for us, but in that, there is pressures right now at the margin level, okay? So what this is driving is our banks in Canada are traditionally very conservative with regard to outsourcing what we call customer interactions. So the banking sector is certainly mature when it comes to outsourcing, but other aspects of the outsourcing industry. When it comes to customer interactions, basically they hold all of these type of opportunities in-house. But due to some certain things that are coming down the pipe that's going to be affecting the banking sector, mainly at the bottom line margin, it's getting squeezed today. they are looking at outsourcing for very strategic reasons. One is certainly cost reduction, but also benchmarking and what have you, and differentiation. So this market is just starting to open up now, and again at the customer interaction level, which is where we're strong, and this is where we play. Canadian outsourcing landscape. I just want to show this to you that depending on what reports you look at, you'll get a varying degree of information here, but we believe it's around $5 billion, and that's the BPO portion. The industry as a whole is about $25 to $30 billion, but that includes everything from technology outsourcing, data center, what have you. But in the BPO space, we believe it to be in the range of about a $5 billion industry. Again, a lot of organizations, there is a lot of activity going on in the Canadian marketplace, but again, in the Canadian marketplace, due to the conservative nature of the Canadian business, a lot of the BPO work is actually being done inside of organizations. We call that proprietary shops. Not a lot of it has been outsourced, so there's tremendous opportunity within the Canadian marketplace for the types of things we do as an organization. This is something that Partho mentioned earlier, and I'll try to do this very quickly going through here, and I'm certainly open to answering any questions about this after if there's detail you want. But in year 2000, myself and a group of private equity organizations, we come in and we acquired what was called OLS. Partway through, within a couple of years, we actually took the organization and we rebuilt it, if you will. And we built it for what we wanted to go after. So there was the makings of an organization. It had a lot of accounts, a lot in the technical support arena, doing internet service provider type business, and we were doing a lot of work out of the US, but delivering it all from Canada. We re-engineered the organization, made the investments, once we determined what we wanted to be when we grew up. From that point, we went and made other investments in very strategic personnel, and we went into the marketplace with a very focused sales and marketing campaign. Through that period of about 2004, that is where we were able to work ourselves into the telecom space in a very big way, into the technology space, and also into the banking space. And from there, basically, it was working with these organizations in order to build the relationships, deliver on excellent service, finding ways to be very creative and bring value add to these organizations. I'm very happy to say that most of all these relationships, all of these relationships are now in the range of anywhere from 6 to 11 years that we've held. And in 2011, this is where we became part of HGS. So since 2011 up to this point, I'm pleased to tell you that it's been great. It, from our perspective, is as purported. It was a year and a half, 18-month courtship, and through that process we got to learn a lot about each other, our capabilities, also with regard to philosophy, alignment, what kind of people, what was our business approach, right? It was very, very important to us. So in going through all that, it is actually all panned out. And the growth that I'm going to show you here in a future chart, I will tell you, a lot of it has to do with because we're part of HGS today. So I kind of covered some of this. What this is basically saying here is that as an organization, when we were OLS, we had a set of business requirements going into the future, and we knew as an organization we needed to find somebody strategic to work with in order to be relevant into the future. We were very good at what we did, but we wanted to ensure longevity and relevancy into the future. And these are just some of the points of items that were critical, we believe, to our success. So this is why we actually chose HGS, because it was entrepreneurial, it was globally local. The approach to business completely lined up to what we were doing. It had a global footprint, and it didn't help that it was part of the HGS, Hindager Group, right, with regard to that reputation that the family has. So this is something that we required not only for our organization, but for our clients. We brought this to the table for our clients. So at the end of the day, it wasn't that OLS chose HGS or that HGS chose OLS. We chose each other together because we really took the time to understand each other properly. So this wasn't just a financial transaction. This was a bit of a marriage, and there was quite a courtship involved at the beginning of it. And these are some of the benefits that we've actually derived out of it since then. Thank you for your time.